whether you're on a treadmill or at a gym or riding in the car, or just you're trying to take a few moments to learn about leadership and help us learn and grow too. I want to thank you for joining us. We're really excited to have you on this episode. I'm going to have one of my really good friends on here, JP Harvey from the Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office, and we're going to introduce him in just a moment. And we're going to be talking about how do we deal with change, or how do we deal with issues when, you know, we might not be that ready to deal with them, and how do we get out of our comfort zone and really deal in that panic and uncomfortable zone. And I'm excited to have him on today. But before we say that, folks, we want to always encourage you to hit that subscribe button. All you have to do is hit that in the subscribe button, and then you'll know automatically when we post a new podcast. We're hoping to do one every week. This is our 25th podcast. And when we started these, we were thinking about, man, what are we going to talk about every week? But we knew we had a vision for leadership, and we knew that at Leaders Helping Leaders Network, that what we're all about here is leaders helping leaders become way better than they were before. And I'm actually coming to you today from in Alabama, and I'm enjoying myself here teaching again. And JP is going to be talking to me from, I'm sure it's beautiful West Palm Beach, and we got our producer who's in her studio in South Carolina. So, you know, technology is a wonderful thing, and we're really excited about today's show, and we're excited about what you're doing for us at LHLN. We're up to 7,000 listeners now, and we've got so many people who are subscribing to our podcast, and we want to help you and encourage you to hit that share button. Let someone else hear this podcast. This isn't the only podcast. There's 25 others, and there's a number of folks that we've talked to on those podcasts that, quite frankly, have changed my life. And so this is what we're all about here. So let's get to the show, and let's talk a little bit with JP. Let me introduce JP. JP Harvey has had 16 years experience as a police officer. He's a lieutenant currently with the Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office. And JP recently was moved into a unit where he had very little experience, and he had very little understanding of what that unit really did, although he's had several assignments in the Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office. JP also has attended our Master Trainers course, and we're going to spend probably a few moments talking about that, talking about some of the things that he might have learned and some of the quotes. And like I've told people, I actually was facilitating that class, and if you will, kind of teaching that class, and I myself took 14 pages of notes. And when you can have a class and you're teaching it and you get that much out of the students, we're doing exactly what we do here at LHLN, which is Leaders Helping Leaders, where we try to learn right along with the leaders, and we try to pass on information. The one thing that is really important to us is to add value to your life. If we're adding value to your leadership, and we're really doing what we're supposed to be doing. And last week we had Ray Walden from the Clay County Sheriff's Office on, and did a great job, and we're looking forward to the same thing from JP. So JP, great to have you with us today.
Hey, thanks for having me, Dean. Good to be here.
I'll tell you what, JP, why don't you take just a moment and kind of tell us a little bit about, in our audience out there, just a little bit about you, and then we'll kind of get into some of the subject matters. We'll talk a little bit about the Master Trainer course, and then we're going to get into this thing where you've been learning over the last, I know, at least 6 months, because I've been talking to you and back and forth, and man, you've learned some really different and some good lessons on leadership in the last 6 months for sure. But talk a little bit more about yourself and what your experience is.
Yeah, sure. So I got into law enforcement a little bit later than most. After high school, went in the military, served in the Army, went to college afterwards up in the White Mountains of New Hampshire. Did a lot of skiing, did a lot of studying, and at the time didn't realize that my degree in communication theory was going to be as important as it is in my leadership journey. So after graduating from college, I got into the private sector for a little bit, doing some IT sales and then in the mortgage business. But there was something missing. I quickly realized that it wasn't the dollar that motivated me as much as I thought that it might. So I started looking at law enforcement. I'd been an explorer in high school very briefly in rural New Hampshire. So I started exploring different parts of the country. I ended up in South Florida working for Palm Beach Police Department. I did 2.5 years there, just enough time to realize that I wanted to get into a bigger agency that had more opportunities. but I had a great time in Palm Beach. It was a fantastic department at the time. So I came to the sheriff's office in 2006. I did some time on road patrol, did a community policing assignment, which was similar to a hybrid of both community policing and street team work, active enforcement in a certain area. Then I had the opportunity to try out and meet our SWAT team, where I did several years on before getting promoted off. Also have some time in the motor unit. I was a detective sergeant in our special investigation unit running financial crimes before getting promoted to lieutenant, some more time on the road, and then served as an executive officer, which is basically the second in the chain of command for the city of Green Acres, who contracts law enforcement services through the sheriff's office. I was just getting comfortable there for about 6 months when I got the phone call about potentially working in K-9. And I can tell you, with your lead up was spot on. I'm not sure what the future holds for me at the sheriff's office and life afterwards, but I'm pretty confident that this is I'll reflect back and look at my time in K-9 as being my leadership crucible. And I say that for a couple of reasons. One being, all the studying and the books that I've read and the classes that I've attended, I've had a lot of opportunities to be both an informal and a formal leader in previous assignments. But this is really where the rubbers hit the road, and I'm responsible, and I have an opportunity to shape and change things. And as we say in the military, the map is not the terrain. You can read all the books and take the classes, but until you're there making those difficult decisions and putting out those fires, things become real very quickly.
Hey, so let's back up for just a minute. Let's talk a little bit about the Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office. How many employees are there at the Sheriff's Office? How many do you guys have?
You broke up a little bit there. It's cutting in and out.
How many employees do you have at the Sheriff's Office, Palm Beach County?
Okay. At the Sheriff's Office, I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but right around 2,000 sworn. When you add our corrections and our civilian and support staff, we're somewhere around 4,000.
So that's not a small agency. That's an agency that you can kind of get lost in the numbers for sure. And you got 4,000 people there. There's a lot going on. So let me get this then. I heard your bio about all the experience you've had, but I did not hear K-9 experience in there prior to K-9 experience. So let me see if I get this exactly right. So you go from zero experience with K-9 to all of a sudden becoming in charge of K-9. Is that right?
Correct.
All right.
Yeah.
Now, so, and I understand the backstory to this, because I know that you were called by a leader that has been on our show, Joel Rossi, who's the captain there, who I know that you trust, and you have a great relationship with Joel. He's one of those guys. He just knows how to lead people, and he was able to convince you to come over to a unit where you had zero experience. So, can I just ask you a question? What the hell were you thinking?
Well, I ask myself that question sometimes too. But in all sincerity, yeah, Joel and I have a personal relationship, and we have a strong personal or professional relationship that started back on SWAT. And he is an exceptional leader. What I love about him, what he said on his show, was there's no hard no. And that's the type of person that I want to work for, because he sees the value in that. So as far as K-9, it was something that I was interested in when I left the town of Palm Beach. Believe it or not, one of the reasons why I left was they didn't have a K-9 unit. And at the time, I wasn't mature enough in my law enforcement and leadership administrative career to understand what my chief told me. But when I asked him if I do the legwork and write a grant, could we get a couple dogs over in the town of Palm Beach? And at the time, Chief Ryder said, no, why would I take on that liability and responsibility when in 5 minutes I can pick up the phone and have 2 dogs from the sheriff's office? Actually, maybe not the coolest answer, but a pretty sound answer when he knows what resources he has internally and externally.
Right.
But as a young cop, I was like, okay, I'm going to go to the sheriff's office. And I was living with a girlfriend who became my wife, and we had a Rottie, and she had 2 big dogs in a 900 square foot apartment. And I quickly realized I didn't have room and they weren't going to give me a dog. So I ended up going in the SWAT direction, and it worked out that way for my career. So I had an interest in canine as a deputy. And then the reality is, you know, Joel and I talked a lot about it, and leadership is leadership. They talk about in the leadership challenge about getting the right people on the bus. And, you know, do you want the employee or the leader that is specific to that job, or do you want the person that has the right communication traits and the right leadership traits that you can fit into a bunch of different positions? So we talked about that. And one of the things I reflected on was, you know, reading my leadership books, continuously trying to grow myself, was, hey, sometimes you're going to have to step out of your comfort zone to have that growth mindset. And just because I don't have the experience in it doesn't mean that I might not be good at it. It just means I'm going to have to go in there and eat some humble pie and really put a lot of extra time in to get to know the administrative side of canine. But then the whole other side is the operational side. How the dogs work, what do they do, what can they do, what are the limitations, liabilities, what are the equipment, pieces of equipment that we're using, what are the best dogs. There's just drinking from a fire hose since I got here, but I think we've been doing well, and we've had a lot of successes, and continue to grow from there.
So let's visit this for a minute, because I think one of the things that I want our audience to understand as when it comes to you, and I know this on a personal level because you and I have a personal relationship too, and we've had a lot of conversations about leadership, and this is the type of person that we love getting on these podcasts, is because I think that you really are kind of a big thinker. You see the bigger picture a lot of times when you don't look at you see the small as well, but you kind of see the bigger picture. So let me set the stage here. One, you're not the best canine handler. Matter of fact, you got zero experience with handling canines. You have no idea what it's like to truly have a canine, although you got dogs. I compare that to, I remember a guy one time told me that he wasn't really a police officer, but he had known a lot of police officers, and he really knew what it was like to be a police officer. And he understood that, although he had worked with them for 17 years, he'd never been one. And I remember telling him, I said, well, that doesn't make no damn sense to me, because I'm kind of one of them straight talkers. And I said, so that tells me that same analogy you use and that same thought process that you use makes me think that just because you drink milk, you know what it's like to be a damn cow. You have no idea what it's like to be a damn cow just because you drink milk. And it's the same thing. So my thing with you is how in the hell do you go to a meeting and zero credibility? Now, you got leadership, a little bit of credibility. I get that. But how do you go to this first meeting with these folks and you have no credibility as a canine handler? What the hell do you say?
It's a great question. And that was an extremely intimidating meeting. And I've been a SWAT instructor, and, as a younger member on the SWAT team, trying to, put into a position early in my SWAT career, teaching senior SWAT guys, that always doesn't go over so well, as far as, that this is how we've always done it type of mentality, and you're the new guy. But going in there, I've got 30 guys sitting back in their chair, their ball caps tilted back on their head, arms folded, and just giving me that 1,000-yard stare. It really comes down to just being genuine, being humble, and being honest. I didn't go in there and try to put some leadership acronyms on the board. I didn't go in there and try to, the no BS zone. That was a no BS zone there too. I didn't try telling them that I knew much anything other than, I've been assigned as a lieutenant, and I look forward to getting to know people. It's going to take some time for you guys to get to know and trust me. But I also look forward to getting to know you guys and see what you guys do on a daily basis. And the number one part of my job right now is to just ensure that you guys get the tools that you need to do your job, come home safely, and as a unit, we're as efficient and effective as possible. It was pretty short and to the point. Joel spoke before me, introducing me, giving me a little bit of extra credibility. And the nice thing is, although I haven't worked a dog, for the most part, I had some sort of relationship with the majority of the people in that room through the course of my career. Whether it was from, teaching at the academy, some of the younger guys I taught quite a bit in the academy, My SWAT background, I'd worked hand in hand with a handful of people, and a few of the guys actually remembered me coming out to unified trainings when I was trying to become a deputy in K9. So reputation is important. It's true what they say, and the listeners know that that precedes you. It can take a decade to build. You can lose it in a second. Fortunately, I had a good reputation, I think, going in. So I had a little bit of credibility, and I just kept it short, and I figured I'd let my actions speak more than my words would.
JP, this is why I love doing these podcasts, because I learn right along with the listeners when I hear folks' story about what they do in terms of leadership. So I want to take your point and kind of build on it for just a minute, if I may. So let's think we got, and when there's a lot of them out there that are listening, there's a lot of listeners. They're maybe young in their leadership career. They might not be the best cop. They might not be the best patrolman. They might not be the best at all this stuff, but they're put in a leadership position where they were fairly good at what they did, but now it's a whole new world. They're intimidated. They don't have that much confidence. They're trying to find directionally. And that first meeting is key now in establishing yourself as a leader. And let me see if I got this right. And I love what you said. You said that first meeting, when you had it, you wanted to be genuine. You wanted to be humble. You wanted to be honest. And then you wanted to build a relationship. Oh my gosh. That's amazing stuff for any leader that we got out there. When you're put into a leadership position where you may not be able to have all this credibility, or you're starting a new assignment, those four things, being genuine, being humble, being honest, and building a relationship, I don't think it gets any better than that. So how was that received by the folks?
I get maybe a tainted view, but the feedback that I got on the back end was that it was very well received. These guys are talk about the no BS zone. I mean, these guys, they don't kid around. They're not a butt kissing group of guys. These are, tactically speaking, some of our better operators out there. They've had more sergeants and lieutenants than they can shake a stick at. Yeah. So it was really rewarding to hear that the feedback was positive. I was well received. But I also knew that, this might sound crazy, but it was almost like meeting a girlfriend's father for the first time. You just kind of want to keep it short and sweet. And they know that it's your behavior that's going to earn the credibility, not what you say in front of them, especially if you get up there and try to BS them with something. So I think it was well received. And as we've gone forward in the last 6 or 7 months, I've gotten a lot of continuous feedback where, I love the saying that, people follow first the person, then the plan. And how you get there is with that interpersonal communication. I got a lot of feedback about people commenting on me taking the time to be present. I really did go all in. I mean, I took all my chips and put them in. And why I did that was I felt like I had a very short window to master as much material as I could. The administrative side's the easy part. That's just a different flavor. The schedule might look a little bit different, but admin is admin. Getting to know your people, and I got a pretty big team. I'm responsible for 55 active dogs. We've got a slew of retired dogs as well that we continue to care for. It's a big unit. We have a ton of moving parts. Just trying to get to know the guys, what motivates them, how can I be the most effective leader for them, and for that I need to know, what their needs are. So I got a lot of good feedback, about being out at training late at night, about going to calls. I know a couple people were surprised when a K9 team walked out of the woods and I was right behind them, backing them up on a track, searching for a felony suspect. So it was those things, trying to earn not only the trust, but build credibility that, hey, I'm in this with you guys. I'm not sitting in the office and working my 8 to 4 and going home and don't know what you guys do out here. I got a lot of positive feedback for that. So that was rewarding, and there's still a lot of room to grow.
Let me, if some of our listeners out there are not familiar with K9 units, the K9 unit officer, having run or been in charge of large K9 units just by virtue of being chief in a larger agency, they're a different breed of cop. They're certainly very cagey. They deal with problems all the time, not only with themselves, with the dogs. They have a high level of responsibility. They are not your normal, just everyday 9-to-5 cop. There's a lot that goes in that they have to put out themselves. And plus their partner can't tell them what's going on. They have to be able to read their partner, which is their dog. And so leading a K9 unit is one of the more, I don't want to say difficult, but K9 officers have a very cagey way of, how can I say this? They just are very smart, and they're very, they know their business better than you. And it's very difficult sometimes to get them to do stuff, because they'll always use the fact that they know better than you when it comes to what really needs to be done. So it's almost like trying to deal with somebody who is the smartest person in the room at every meeting you're with the K9 folks. And they use every one of those, all those clever things, if you will, to be able to push things in their direction, if you will. I hope I said that with enough political savvy to not say that all K9 officers are a bunch of bullshit artists, but to be quite honest with you, they're very good at manipulating things in their direction. Let's just say that.
Well, my two thoughts on that are that, when I look at who's the alpha, are we talking about the dog or the handler? Because I got a room of 35 alphas sitting there in front of me. And sometimes it's a big ego contest is how it feels. But it's easy to get the wool pulled on. I found myself, so I can speak personally, I found that it was a couple of times I felt like I was getting the wool pulled on me. And it wasn't necessarily because they were trying to be deceitful or anything like that. But they knew that if they worded a phrase a certain way, or they had, gave me a proposal in a certain way, it could really help their agenda, whatever that was, good, bad, or indifferent. And the reality is, we have not done a great job at the sheriff's office of any type of succession training, of promoting growth within the K9 unit, where people will promote and become the best versions of themselves and bring their talent back to the road, and then even back to K9 as a supervisor. It can be very lucrative in K9 with, not only our base pay is real high down here, but you add, assignment pay, you add care and maintenance pay, and, people, a whole bunch of overtime, especially with all the Trump stuff going on. And it's a really valid question why, unless someone's really passionate about becoming a formal leader within an organization, they're going to be hard pressed to give up the financial benefits of being a handler.
Oh yeah. And that's what I was talking about. They are a unique specialty unit within an organization, and they know where the hidden things are much more than you do. Let's say,
sure, absolutely.
Results, they can, they're very good. They're very smart people. And like you said, they're alpha, and they do a tremendous job in the organization, and they are so needed, and they're so, what a great service they do for us in K9 units. But leading them is a little bit challenging. Let's just put it at that. Sometimes it can be a little more challenging, because these guys know their job and they know what the hell they're doing. And so it's really hard to pull the wool.
And they also know that I don't have any experience. So that's an easy mark.
That was kind of what I was trying to allude to, is the fact they do understand taking advantage of some situations, but that's okay, because we as leaders, it just makes us try to do things we try to do better. So when you looked at your K9 experience and you looked at putting this all together, I liked what you said about you read a lot of books, you do that stuff. Are you reading something right now that are you rereading something that you want to share with us that you're out there doing? in one of your books or articles or anything like that that you can share with our audience?
Yeah, a couple of things. So when I was at the Master Presenter course, you had mentioned in the class about the Tao book. I've just started that. The Tao of Pooh. My 9-year-old son asked if he could read it because he thought it was about Winnie the Pooh, and I got a chuckle out of that because it goes to the heart of the book that it's just that simple. Sometimes if you don't make it complicated, it doesn't have to be complicated.
Right.
We got a couple of people that are looking to promote now with all the things I just said. A few of our guys are taking the promotional process, and they've got their sergeant's exam coming up in a couple of months. So the sergeants and I here have made ourselves available as a resource to help them the testing process a little bit, but the tricky part in our promotional process is our scenario component. And that's where a lot of guys that may have a ton of tactical experience, they don't understand sometimes how to package up the response that will get them the most points. So we are going to be providing a class for our guys so that they can hopefully be as successful as possible. So I got back to the basics. Leadership challenge for me, Kuzes and Kuzner is at the backbone of our promotional process. I've probably read 30 to 40 leadership books since that book, and I feel the overwhelming majority of them have almost taken a section out of the leadership challenge and expanded on it with a whole nother book. It's just that good of a book. So I would say it's, and you've mentioned before talking about it, that it's not the easiest read. It can be a little bit dry. When I go out for a run, if I'm listening to, some other music, I tend to run a little bit quicker. But if I put this on my audiobook, I tend to retain a lot of it. So I've been getting back and really focusing on this so that I can relate to my guys as they're preparing for the process and give them the most relevant information.
JP, I was thinking about, let me give you a second here, and I don't want to catch you where, you're pretty good on your feet. So if you were to learn a life lesson from your experience, not only at the sheriff's office and things you're doing there, but just recently in the K-9 of being put to the challenge of really leading an organizational group that, wanted to go in a different direction and whatever the leadership change or whatever that was, but then refocusing people. Is there a lesson you've learned about yourself in that? Is there a lesson that you personally could say, man, you know what, I really learned this about myself over the last little bit in terms of leadership?
I think that I'm going to answer that in two parts. The first super short answer is I keep thinking of the quote from Ford. If you think you can, you can. And if you think you can't, you can't. Either way, you're right. And I probably just totally butchered that. But it's true. It's the power of positivity and your mindset is extremely important. So a lot of those things have been validated and reaffirmed for me because this has been a roller coaster. I've had some really great successes and I've had some days that I've just gone home and literally just take my dog for an extra long walk, like just asking, myself, all right, how are we going to get through this? And it's important to have that, my own personal why, reflect on that quite a bit. But to your point, I think where you're going with your question is, this is a journey. Leadership is a journey, and changing from, a lot of what I found here was just a fixed mindset in K9. One thing that I've learned, the number one sign of a fixed mindset is that quote, well, this is how we've always done it. And I can't tell you how many times I've heard that. And when I hear that, my little fixed mindset light goes off and, all right, so how do we get you to a growth mindset? Having a growth mindset and moving a unit in that direction is a journey and a partnership. It isn't any one thing that I can or can't do, but it's a team effort. And not just for me, but a leader's interpersonal communication skills, I think, are the most important thing. If you can show them how to, inspire that shared vision of here's where we are, here, and this is why it's so important that we get there. If you can effectively communicate that, you're going to get a lot more buy-in. And those are some of the early lessons in the first 6 months at K9 that have really run true for me.
One of the things that I'm really pleased with what you've been able to do, because watching from afar, I have a personal interest in your success for sure, and I have a professional one too, is that you took advantage of our mentoring program here that we offer at Leaders Helping Leaders Network mentoring program. Matter of fact, I had a K-9 sergeant who is in charge or helps now just recently got promoted to lieutenant in Columbia, South Carolina, who I used to work with. And I put you in charge with Cynthia up there in terms of helping. Was she I know she was a good help to you. And was that valuable to you to kind of have somebody because she's been doing it forever?
No, it wasn't valuable. It was invaluable. And why I say that is you had made a comment a couple of minutes ago. You know, one of the things that I found quickly is asking questions about K-9 to the folks in my K-9 unit. I would often get a cultured response. Now, let me be clear. That wasn't saying that they were trying to BS me all the time or anything like that. But, you know, sometimes I don't know if people don't take for granted and don't just assume that all of your people understand the why. Sometimes they don't. And so when you're asking why related questions, they may not know. And that's when you get a lot of well, that's the way we've always done it. And sometimes it can be a cop out and excuse, but sometimes they don't know the why. So what I found was asking K-9 related questions, I would get a cultured response from the Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office perception of how we do things. And I quickly realized I need to get I need to network and find some people that I can ask some questions to where I'm not going to get that cultured response, but there's more than one way of doing business. And so Cynthia was incredibly valuable to me for that. You know, we had a lot of conversations about different accreditation processes, about, you know, how many apprehensions do they have with dog bites? You know, and then I can look at different areas, different sizes, different number of dogs, but it gave me a little bit of insight. And through that, as valuable as that was, I made it a point whenever I was out and about, whether it was working President Trump detail at Mar-a-Lago, but I was talking to the military guys, getting business cards, finding out who they did their training with, and quickly started building up a nice network of contacts, K-9 related. So the mentoring thing is absolutely huge. And, you know, what I love, and this ties directly into it, what I love about teaching at the police academy is I'm constantly going over the basics. And when you help other people through teaching, you're learning as well. So kind of a long answer, but hopefully that.
No, and I like what you said there. And let's define for me and our audience, when you say cultured response, what do you mean?
So if I ask a question related to a K-9 topic, I'm going to get the answer from my guys of how they've always done business. Why is it that we do it this way? Well, here's why we do it this way. That's not saying that their answer is going to be wrong, but I'm struggling on this one.
No, I understand where you're coming. I understand where you're coming from, because when I look at a culture response, what you said defines it. I just want our audience to understand that what we're talking about is a cultured response is not necessarily a wrong response. It's wrong. It's the response they're used to getting or giving.
I got it. Yeah. So
that put in
there.
Can
we start that one over and just?
Yeah, go ahead.
Can you just ask me that again? I got a good.
All right.
Good part on it.
What's a cultured response?
Cultured response, what I found is that when you ask somebody a question directly related to something within the organization, I found that a lot of times they only saw things through a certain lens. There wasn't, they didn't always look at things from a higher level, you know, maybe just the ground level or the 500-foot level. They didn't go up at all to the couple 1,000-foot view. So I'd get an answer that would relate to, this is how we always do it. And what I found I needed to do was get information from other resources that would validate what my guys were saying as a benchmark to say, hey, are we, as a barometer rather, are we doing everything best practices, or are there areas that we can be improving in? And one of the ways that I did that was by not only reaching out to Cheryl, but reaching out to other people, just to see what other information was out there. What I've found is within our own organization, we train a lot. We do a lot of training for municipalities in the area, but there's an area of improvement where we can go seek more outside training to find out what are the current best practices and where does the benchmark lie, and then pursue that. So when I'd ask training questions, I'd sometimes get a cultural response of, this is kind of how we've always done it, and we train other people and they come to us, so this is how we're going to do it. If that makes sense.
No, it's perfect sense. Now, when we were in Asheville, I told you about a book that I'd read called The Tao of Pooh. And I told you it took me like 4 times reading that damn book, or 3 times reading that book, to where I really understood what that book was all about. And it's not because, I mean, it may be partly because I'm, maybe not that great a reader or whatever it is, but it was probably because I didn't open my mind to what the book was actually saying. Did you find the same thing when you were reading that book, the difficulty of it?
Yes, because sometimes when you read certain things, you start to assume that you know where they're going to go with it, but then it relates differently to something else.
Yeah, and that book, Ed Solzback, who used to be an FBI agent and taught at the FBI Academy, who I had the pleasure of setting under his instruction, he challenged me with that book. And he challenged me because he knew that he was really testing not whether I'd read the book or not, but whether I would take the time to learn and take the time to put into leadership what needs to be done. So as I said in the Master Trainer course, and I'll say again, leadership is not what you know, it's what you're willing to learn. And it sounds like to me that you've kind of become a master at being willing to learn, and that you've had some great experiences because, and I know you personally, JP, as we wrap our podcast up here, that you are very humble. You really are in it for the right reasons. And sometimes being in it for the right reasons is tough because you got to make tough decisions. There's no question about that. But at the end of the day, that's what you're in it for. And I think what I'm getting from you in this whole thing is a great example of what it's like to only to be put in a leadership position, but also be willing to learn. And I think that's a great testament to you, and also to Joel Rossi, who's your captain there, and the folks I've worked with at Palm Beach. But so I'm going to give you a chance to kind of close us out here, and then say anything you want to say about leadership, and then we'll close out our podcast here.
Well, I love what Kouzes and Posner say is, if you want to be a leader, you can be. You just have to be willing to put the time in and do the reading and grow yourself. And my goal is to be the best version of myself so that I can help my folks get to become the best versions of themselves. And that sounded absolutely horrible. So
no, it didn't. It's absolutely true. And I think that there's nothing more you can say and build on that. You got to be the best version of yourself and best version of a leader. Folks, this is Dean Chris. Thanks for joining us.
Do you want to say that again?
Well, go ahead. We'll say it. Go ahead.
All right.
He's going to say it again. So Andrew edited it again. Here we go.
Thanks, Andrew. Love you. So I think the big takeaway that I've gotten in my short leadership experience is that it's a journey. It's one of growth. And it really comes down to servant-to leadership, of serving those. I think it's important that we do our best to be our best as a role model to the people that we serve, and help them grow into the best versions of themselves.
JP, I thank you. JP Harvey's been with us on the podcast, not only a friend of mine, but a person I consider to be a great leader. I do get an opportunity to see many leaders around this great country. We're trying to bring those to you on Straight Talk on Leadership. JP, thank you. It's Dean. Forget to join us next time. All right, folks, there we go. Good stuff, man. Awesome.